My name's Dr Konrad Kangru. I'm a rural GP from Killarney in South Queensland and also a member of the RACGP Rural Faculty Council. And Anita, thank you so much for giving your rural members the opportunity to catch up on some of your thoughts on a few of the issues that are facing rural general practice as we lead into the 2026 presidential election. Anita, there's a few issues which have certainly been bubbling away for us at rural faculty, and also we know from the members who you've been hearing from as well. One of the really crucial components of general practice across Australia, and particularly in rural areas, is that real dependence we've got on our international medical graduate colleagues. So often we see these people come to Australia ready to make a fantastic contribution, and we really do value the role that they play. But even at a college level, we find that we might see them at our fellowship ceremonies or occasionally, but then we just lose touch. Anita, how would you better engage with and support our IMG colleagues as they move through into our profession?
Thanks, Conrad. And there's two components to my answer to this. There's what can we do to support IMGs outside of the college, and what can we do to support them within the college. When it comes to outside of the college, I very strongly believe that we need to change the narrative around international medical graduates. There is a negative narrative that has existed in Australia now, certainly for as long as I've had my licence to practice, and we need to remove that negative sentiment and in its place put what is appropriate, which is a recognition and a celebration of the fact that we have amazing people who come from other countries to Australia, and they are willing to serve the Australian public for the whole of their lives or their careers. So I want a positive narrative to be out in the media, in the public, definitely with government, in recognition of the fact that were it not for IMGs in Australia, our health system would have collapsed decades ago. And so we need to celebrate the fact that people who have come to our country to set up their lives and to serve Australian patients have done a huge service. Internally, I think there are quite a few things that can be done, both inside the college and its culture, but also with regard to the processes that IMGs have to deal with when they're trying to set up their capacity to practice here. So I think we need to be welcoming. I think we need to invite IMGs into spaces, not only to get help with training, but to socialise, to set up communities of practice, to support, such as concierge services, so that you can settle into new towns, make friends, and have a successful way of life, not just a successful training experience. I also believe there are many instances in which systems clash with each other to the disadvantage of the IMG candidate. And there is a role for the RACGP with government and with regulators to point out that we apply significant time pressures on IMGs that overlooks the fact that actually leaving your country and coming to another country is a really big deal. And we need to advocate for there being more time, more flexibility in some of our AMC and APRA and visa processes, and more flexibility inside of the college as well, to give people the time and the capacity to be successful and not just make it across the line of training, but actually thrive and feel welcomed into Australian general practice.
That's wonderful. That's lovely, Anita. Thanks for that. And then rather the emerging areas for some of our members is going to be the rise of rural generalism. Within rural faculty, we're tremendously excited about the opportunities that this brings, and we have now got AMC accreditation, and we're looking in conjunction with ACRM to really roll out rural generalism in the years to come. What do you see the place of rural generalism being within our college, within our profession?
I think that this is an enormously important and positive story for general practice. I'm extremely proud of what an Australian rural generalist is. And so I think this is to be celebrated. I think that rural generalism is one of the ways to strengthen rural general practice in our country. The reason for that is that, first of all, we've got RGs with fantastic advanced skills that serves their communities. Now, one of the problems I see with that is we're still needing hospitals to embrace GPs, treat them with respect and recognition, and give them places within hospitals with which they can use their advanced skills. So we know that, for example, many RGs struggle to use some of their skills in palliative care or in anaesthetics because the hospitals are not willing to open the doors to them. So that has to change, and that requires political will. In Victoria, as you know, I've been very concerned for over 6 years about some of the relationships between hospitals here and rural GPs. And after 6 long years of advocacy, I have an agreement from the Department of Health that we will put a GP onto every rural hospital board in recognition that we need to shift the attitude towards general practice in rural areas and embrace the RG and what GPs can do in terms of hospital care. So this is all very positive. One of the things that we need to bear in mind, however, is GPs do the majority of their good work in the community. Patients want to be in the community. It is cheaper and more acceptable to everyone to be cared for in the community. And that's why we do have the Colin Grove Agreement, which really is a fantastic concept that needs to be universally deployed around Australia, because it is the mechanism by which we will be able to bridge general practice with hospital care. The RG that's moving seamlessly between hospital and community is the way that patients too will be able to move between the two sectors without falling through the cracks. And that will bridge some of the traditional issues that we have with communication continuity of care. But also the RG will be able to advocate for what general practice is capable of, so that the hospitals and the general practices can collaborate more closely, which is in the best interest of the patient.
Absolutely wonderful. Thanks so much for that, Anita. After many years of seeing dwindling application numbers and registrar numbers, we're finally starting to see that tide turn. And I'm so pleased that we can get out of that negative narrative that we've been defending for time. But now we're in a position where we've actually got a high number of registrars wanting to come in than we can actually place. Anita, a lot of these registrars are needed in rural areas. How would you go about encouraging more GP supervisors and increasing the number of training posts available rurally?
Yes. Now, this is a matter of urgency, and I think we need to address this as soon as we are able to, and we need to express this urgency to government. We need to, again, it's always the theme of respect and recognition for what an expert generalist is, and somebody who is willing to use their expertise to train and teach the future of general practice is somebody who should be richly celebrated and rewarded for that pursuit. So we need to put appropriate funding on the table. We need to recognise that it takes time. Doing it well takes that person away from their own patients and other pursuits and running their businesses, but it is incredibly worthwhile. And so funding is of paramount importance. I do not believe that GPs any longer should be expected to fill the gaps of the entire health system with their altruism alone. So it is entirely reasonable that we recognise the value of the expertise of the supervisor and pay for that expertise accordingly. I think it will also help newer supervisors enter into supervision. So in each practice, if we can have more supervisors willing to take on registrars and medical students, then we build capacity. And I think that once somebody has achieved their fellowship, the next thing that the college needs to do is say, don't get lost from us. How about you consider your own career in medical education and supervision? And so build that momentum and that enthusiasm, because without supervisors, there is no future of general practice. And we need, with all of the people that are wanting to go into general practice, we need to take that opportunity and not squander it. And so we need them to have high quality supervisors that can teach them, and so that they don't enter other specialties.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Part of what has been evolving over recent years in response to all of those ongoing shortages has been this constant messaging from other professions of, oh, you rural GPs are too busy to do this work here. Let us take that on for you. And we're hearing more and more from our members that this incessant scope of practice creep, which is coming from other professions, is really starting to undermine the role of the general practitioner. Anita, how would you defend that critical central place of the rural general practitioner against the scope creep from other professions?
The hard facts of the matter is that no other craft group can replace the expert skills and knowledge of a generalist, an expert generalist who has been trained for more than 10 years in the art and science of general practice. And I do reflect also that with some of the projects that have occurred in terms of increasing scope of practice, particularly with pharmacists, the majority of those services have been delivered in metropolitan areas. So they are not solving any kind of rural issue with those changes to scope of practice. Having said that, however, we do recognise that multidisciplinary teams are necessarily the way of the future. But the most important point there is that there's only really one person who has the skill and knowledge and experience to take on the responsibility of the clinical governance of an MDT, and that is an expert generalist. Nobody who has lesser training or training in only one body system or one component of delivering health will have the requisite skills. So multidisciplinary teams must be led by GPs, particularly if we are to preserve quality and safety. And I do not agree with access at all costs if that cost is a lowering of quality and safety and then the resulting patient harms that we have seen that have occurred in other pilots around the world. So the hard facts are that you need to be an expert generalist in order to oversee and take on the responsibility of an MDT. But I do believe if we set up those MDTs appropriately, we will better serve communities, particularly rural communities.
Well and truly, well and truly. And finally, Anita, moving on to our student colleagues. Yeah, we were very excited to welcome the federal government announcement recently of paying students in other allied health professions to undertake their practical placements. But sadly, medical students were omitted from that group. We know that for our medical students coming out and doing their rural placements in particular, there's a lot of disposition that happens, that they're having to leave home, usually a part-time job, their families, and it really is a significant burden for them. We also know that it is those longer-term placements that really do turn into actually doctors and graduates wanting to come out rurally. Anita, how do we push back against this medical student placement poverty which we see for rural areas?
This decision to leave medical students out of this placement poverty policy is abhorrent to me, because I had the experience of a very difficult social and financial time when I was at medical school, and those memories are with me still. And I would challenge people in government to sit before a medical student who's from a rural area or who has not grown up with privilege, or a First Nations student, and tell them why it's reasonable to exclude them from this program. There is a significant bias in this government at the moment that, in my opinion, leans towards anti-doctor sentiment. The fact of the matter is that not all medical students and medical personnel come from privilege. Many of us struggle to get through our degrees, and the message that medical degrees are only for people who come from privilege because you will not receive any help from the government in order to do your thousands of hours of placement is a message of deep inequity, and we need to push back against that and point that out, because medical students have the same rights to support from the government as anyone else, and you should not be excluded based on the type of degree that you have chosen. I feel very strongly about this, and I do want to take this up and take this further. So thank you for asking me this question, because I believe the government has a social contract with the medical students, just as it does with the others that it has chosen to help.
Well, Anita, thank you so much for your time on all of those areas. It's obvious that you're passionate about these issues, and I've got no qualms at all that rural practice is going to be well served with you in the leadership position. So thank you very much for joining us and your rural members today, and all the best for the campaign.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you.